Hello everyone, I'm Heather Arnold and I used to be local history librarian here at Casey Cardinia Libraries, but I've retired now. So I'm presenting this as the president of the Koorup Swamp Historical Society. And today we are looking at genealogy sites on the internet. So there are thousands and thousands and thousands of genealogy related sites on the internet. Some you have to pay for, some you don't have to pay for, some are really good and some are complete rubbish. You know, so there's a whole range of things out there. And today we're looking at what I believe are reliable and useful sources of information on the internet for family history. So I've given you a handout and we'll go through the handout. We won't look at everything, of course, because we'll be here forever. But so the first section on the handout are genealogical societies. So I've just got a few lists of the local genealogical societies that I think you should join if you're doing family history. Just join one or two of them, or just one if you only need to do one, because they have a whole list of resources and a whole library full of resources that you're not going to get in the public library. Jenny and Carol, welcome. We've only just started, so I'll just start again, I think, just to bring you up to speed. So we're just looking today at genealogical sites on the internet. And Michelle's already emailed you a handout, so you should have all the websites that I'm talking about today, so you won't need to write them all down. And so just check your emails to make sure you've got it. Otherwise, we'll send it to you later. So we'll start off by looking at some websites from genealogical societies. Actually, I should share my screen. I'm going to share my screen. Gee, you think I'd know, wouldn't you? Hang on. Share. Gosh, I've done this so many times, and yet I can't find it. Oh, there it is here, this one. Right, so can you see search your family history? Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Michelle? Yep, yes, that's good. Okay, so I've got a list of 5 genealogical societies that are close by to us here. The Narre Warren District Family History Group, who of course are based at Cranbourne Library. And they're not just Narre Warren, as I told you last week, they have a wide range of resources. We won't look at their website, but the URL is there. There's also what used to call the Australian Institute of Genealogical Studies, now called Family History Connections, and the GSB, which is the Genealogical Society of Victoria, and they're both in town. One's in Blackburn, one's in Queen Street, and they have a whole range of resources that are worth looking at. And just other local ones are the ones that one based at Frankston, the Mornington Peninsula Family History Service, and the West Gippsland Genealogical Society based at Warrigal. So either way, like them and the Narre Warren Family History Group, they have records from interstate, overseas, and also local records. So we're also going to look at, which will be next week, worldwide databases. So I'm not going to look today at Ancestry and Find My Past because we're doing that next week. But there is also Family Search, which we'll look at next week as well because it's related to Ancestry and Find My Past. And Family Search, as I said last week, is the database of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the Mormons, as they're more familiarly known, and they have this huge collection of resources available free to the general public. But we won't look at them today because that's next week's thing. So what I want to look at today, our next category, is births, deaths, and marriage websites. So these are the websites maintained by the various states and their indexes to the births and the deaths and the marriage certificates or registrations. And you need to use the indexes to get the registration certificate, registration number to buy a certificate. And you buy a certificate, as I said last week, because you do get more information on them than you just do from other sources. So what you should see on your screen now is the Victorian Family History website. It's Births, Deaths and Marriages Victoria. Can you see that, Michelle? Can you nod? Yes, thank you. Right. So so you run this site, you do a quick search here, search our records now. And I have to say, this is a very unforgiving website. So if you put the wrong thing in, you get nothing. So just we'll just put a weatherhead, Eva. and put a birth, and she was born 1900. So you have to make sure you tick the category you want, put in the year or a year range. I know she was born 19, oops, and I've put it in the wrong spot. I've put in the registration number. That's a mistake that we sometimes make. So just make sure if you can't find anything, you put the information in the right box, and then if you click search. So that's Eva Eleanor, that's grandma. She was born in 1901. It says Blue Mountain. She was born near Lineville, and it should give you her father's name, Horatio William Weatherhead, and her mother's name. Oh, hang on. That's if you want to buy it. Eleanor Hunt, and it gives you the registration number over here. So this is the sort of information you get on the Victorian indexes. If you are looking at a death notice, sometimes now they've actually added place of birth, and they've also added the spouse at death. So they've got volunteers at the in the, I don't know where this is, Victorian birth, deaths and marriage offices all the time, looking at index, looking at the individual certificates and adding more information. So if you're really lucky, you sometimes find that these other categories, not in a birth of course, but in a death certificate, has been filled out, place of birth, place of death, and the spouse at death. And sometimes you get the age at death as well. So, you know, depending on what you're looking for, you do sometimes get more information. But what you will only get, of course, is just the year of birth, 1901. You don't get a date of birth. But if you go to Queensland, so this is the Queensland one. I've given you the address on the handout. They give you, so we'll put in Weatherhead and put in search. Oh, and because I had that search up before, let's try this again. A birth, Weatherhead, search. So in Queensland, they actually give you the actual date of the event. So you get the date of birth. As you can see, Stella was born on the 9th of January, 1915. In Victoria, you just get the year. In New South Wales, in Queensland, you get the date, month, and year. And also you get the mother's maiden name, full name, and the father's name. So so states vary between information they give you for free, and also they vary between the year range of events that you can search for. So there is no pattern. It just depends on what their rules are. In New South Wales, for instance, if you look up a birth, you don't get any surnames at all. So you don't get the mother's maiden name, you just get her first name. You don't get the father's surname either. Presume it's the same surname. But, you know, it just depends. So they're all worth looking at, and they're interesting. But Queensland, as I said, you get value for money because you don't pay anything, and you actually get the actual day, month, and a year of the birth, death, or marriage. So I've given you the long list of the other ones for different states that you can look at to find this information. Now, also on this list is a list of government sites, Australian government sites. And for Victoria, the Public Records Office of Victoria has a lot more information than you might expect on the average person in the street. The Public Records Office of Victoria is the government record, is where they keep government records. So any government records created by government bodies such as Education Department, Health Department, local government, State Rivers and Water Supply Commission, which used to be a government body, Gas and Fuel Corporation, all those government bodies were required to send their records to the Public Records Office of Victoria. They don't have to send everything. They just send there's a list of sort of things that they are required to send. So not everything. So for instance, with education records, what everyone who does family history wants are, of course, the pupil records or the school records. And they don't seem to have ever been required to have been sent to the Public Records Office of Victoria. So if you're looking at the school records for Caroline State School, what you will get is all the correspondence between the teacher at the school and the education department and any other sort of official stuff like that. But what you really want, of course, is who was there and when they were there, but you don't get that. So that's a bit of an annoying thing. But there is a lot of other information. So if you put in, they have one interesting thing is teacher. And in the last year with COVID, they've done a lot of digitising. They've put so much stuff up recently, which used to be digitised and now is digitised and online. So the Public Records Office and the State Library of Victoria have spent the last 2 years, I presume because they're trying to keep their staff employed while they've been closed, but they've really added so much digital information to their websites recently, and it's just the most amazing thing. State Library of Victoria, I reckon they've added hundreds of thousands of photographs recently, because I go through there quite a lot and look at various suburbs, and all of a sudden you find something new. You think, oh, that's good. They've done more digitising. So one of the things the Public Records Office of Victoria has digitised are all the records of school teachers to 1951. So this is my grandma, Vita Thewlis, Vita Reed she was, and then she became Thewlis. So you actually see her teacher record. It's so exciting. You can't really see it very well here, but it tells you, let me see, is a good junior teacher, sympathetic and helpful. So, of course, you may remember, if you're old enough like I am, that in the olden days, inspectors came around to schools to inspect the teachers, and it was the inspectors that did all the reports on the teachers. So there's a whole lot of information about Grandma from the inspectors gave, and then when she resigned because she got married, and then she came back after her husband died, and she taught again when she was married. So, because of course in the olden days, women teachers had to resign when they were married. So you might sort of think, what would a government record office have on my family? Well, you know, they often have more than what you might expect. They have shipping records, which we'll look at later. They have these teacher records. They sometimes have photos. They've got photographs. If you're, they've recently digitised a whole lot of government building photos. So I went to Pakenham Consolidated School, which was a school that was formed in 1951. It started, and then they've got at least 100 photos of building of that school. I mean, you're not going to get a photo of every single school you went to, but you might find a photo of a school that your ancestor went to. You might find there's a teacher record. You might find if there, if you can go into, like, there's correspondence files from, say, the Melbourne City Council, that they wrote a letter to the Melbourne City Council in the 1880s. You don't know what you might find at the Public Records Office of Victoria. And because they've done a lot more digitising, a lot more indexing over the last few years, you've got a better chances of finding information about your ancestors than you ever had. And of course, the Public Records Office of Victoria also has the wills and probate papers and inquests. So wills are digitised to 25, I think. Inquests are digitised to, I don't know, 100 years ago or something like that. So there is lots of information out there. So if we just go back to here, the best way to find information, go to Explore the Collection at the top here, and then go, you get a whole lot of choices of Explore Archives by topic is what you want. And then wills and probate, family history, passenger records, researching land, researching your house. Researching land, they often have some rate books digitised, inquest and coronial records, Aboriginals, adoptions, all these things. I mean, you're not going to, obviously with adoption records, you won't get anything really recent or anything, of course, due to privacy reasons, but you don't know what you're going to find. So Public Records Office of Victoria is always worth looking at. And there are, of course, the same archives in each state. So there's the National Archives of Australia that has, which I wasn't going to look at, but we will look at that. The National Archives has passenger records for migrants who came after 1900. You can find that here. Explore collection record search, and go to name search, and you'll find you'll find war records here, immigration records, various other records here, but you might be surprised what you would find for the National Archives. The passenger records, passenger arrivals, we'll look at, I think, search. Okay, so this is my sister's mother-in-law. and this is her, she'd already come to Australia, but she went home in 1960, back to Holland in 1969 to visit her family, of course, and then...
physically or mentally?
Mentally and physically. When I came here, I was able to stand up, and
I think, Mary, we can hear you. You might want to put yourself on mute. Yeah. Yeah, so anyway, so this is the sort of thing you may find that if you're, so this is, the passenger arrivals are for tourists who'd come from overseas, or for people like Elizabeth, who at the time wasn't a naturalised citizen, but she had residency. So there's a passenger card for her, like she's a permanent residence, that's where she lived, that's her flight and everything. So, you know, you don't know what you're going to find at the National Archives. Some really interesting information. So I'd say that when you're looking for information about your family and you think, oh, what would they have? Just put a name in a search box, because you never know what's going to be there. Don't assume that you're not going to have information about your family. So also on this list, State Library Victoria has a lot of information. Sort of, they have one of the best things under Search and Discover. They have popular digitised collections. And they have they have lots of useful things, but they have Sans McDougall, which are the post office directories, which tell you from 1850, 60, 1860 or something like that. It tells you who lived in what street in Melbourne and what they did. They've just changed their system now. They're a little bit slower to load than it used to be. It starts at 1860. So if you want to find out, and so they have two lists. They have an alphabetical list of everyone who lived in Melbourne, and then they have usually a list by, well, they have many lists, a list by street. So you go into 1895. View contents. It's a little bit slower to load than it was. Street directory, that one. Oh, so we just look at one page. That's right, I should go look it up. Oh, okay. We might just continue while we're waiting for that to load. So they have a trade directory. So if your great-grandfather was a blacksmith in Collingwood in 1890, he should be listed in Sans McDougall directory. His home address will be listed and things like that. So it is the Sans McDougall post office directories are a rich source of information, which at the moment take forever to load. So we'll just go from here. They also have the, if you're wondering, go back. They also have the not post office directories, the Old Melbourne Street directories from 1912 to 1952. So if you're wondering, you know, whether your suburb looked like in 1912 or what streets were there, they have those digitised as well, plus various other things. And they have also, if you go there in person, they have lots and lots of resources for family historians. So that's the State Library. Archives Office of Tasmania. Now that's really good. So I'll get rid of that. So the Archives Office of Tasmania is just an amazing site. So they have, if you go to the names, I find it hard to get there, so I just put a general search in, then you get to this page here, and you go to Names Index, I'll put in Weatherhead, I know they were there, and then we have here, so here's the Thomas Weatherhead who left Tasmania 1822. If you want to find a birth, there's 4 births. Select. We'll just look at Rosa. So not only do you get the information who her parents were and when she was born and where she was born, but you also get a copy of the record as well. So in Victoria, you have to pay for this, but in Tasmania, they give it to you for nothing. So, and you can download this. It's just amazing. So basically, their birth, deaths and marriage certificates in Tasmania till about 1880 are all online at Tasmanian Archives and all free to download. And they have convict records, shipping records. They have extensive convict records. It's just, you know, it's a really, really great site. So that's Tasmanian Archives. So if you had any ancestors who went to Tasmania, the Tasmanian Archives is the place to go. It's just an amazing site. And there's also, of course, the same archives in South Australia, Queensland, Western Australia, etc. And they all vary as to what you're going to get. So you're not going to find the same information everywhere, but you know, you don't know what you're going to find. I also on the list have the Australian Institute of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Studies, and they have a family history section as well. So if you have Indigenous ancestors, you might find some information about how to trace them in that section. Right, so we'll close this down. Now, you would have found that if you do your family history, if people come to Australia, that sometimes you find that some of your ancestors or their brothers and sisters went to a colony in Australia, they went to Victoria, they went to New South Wales, they went to Tassie, and some of them went to another British colony, which was New Zealand. And it's not uncommon to find that they went to Victoria, then to New Zealand, or New Zealand first, then to Victoria, etc. So there's a lot of crossing the ditch, as they like to call it. And so if you can't find a birth or a death or a marriage or whatever in Victoria, try to go or anywhere else in Australia, have a look in New Zealand, because you don't, you know, it's not unusual to find this sort of moving from one colony to another, because we're all colonies then, of course. And so New Zealand has births, marriages and deaths with these various years and dates. 100 years ago, 50 still births if registered, marriages and deaths as well. So I just put a death in. I'm sure there would have been. Oh, you have to put a date in. Sometimes you have to put a specific date. I just make something up. Oh, no searches. Anyway, I should have done a bit more research on this. But anyway, you get the picture. So what you get here is, I'll just find Robert Jones. I'm sure there's Robert Jones that was born sometime there. There we go. So Robert Jones, and it just tells you when they were born and, when they died, sorry, this is the death registration, the year they died, how old they were. So that's the information you get. But, you know, you can then order the certificate if you want to. So that's the New Zealand indexes. So as I said, if you can't find someone in Victoria or the rest of Australia, have a look in New Zealand, because you might find they went there first or went there later. Next 2 weeks' time, I'm looking at Trove, and Trove is the Australian newspaper database. New Zealand has Papers Past, which is the New Zealand papers database, which we'll look at in 2 weeks' time. And that's another source of information, because like all newspapers, they have birth, deaths and marriages and obituaries and things like that. So in this list of government sites for overseas, we include the National Archives of the United Kingdom, Scottish Archives, Scotland's Peoples, Yorkshire Births, Deaths and Marriages, National Archives of Ireland, and this one here, which is Irish Genealogy, which is a relatively new site the last few years. And they have, if you've got Irish ancestors, it's a really, really great site. They'll go home. And you can just search by first name, last name, location. I presume if you're doing a Patrick Murphy or a sort of relatively common Irish name, if you have the location, that would certainly be worth putting that in, and a year range. I just looked for Ellen Dugan. And we'll just search. So you can see they've got church records, civil records, census records, a whole range of records of that you can look through. And we'll look at civil records. Is there anything? Oh, I'm not a robot. Oh, I have to look again. Oh, I checked the box. Oh, okay. Oh, they're very, you have to write your name here. Submit. Okay, so here's the marriage. That's actually my great-great-grandparents. Here's the marriage of George Glover to Alan Dugan in December 1851, and they were in Northern Ireland, and that tells you where they were, other marriages as well. So that's the Irish genealogy site. They have, obviously, it's a civil record, and they also have parish records as well. You know, it's an amazing site, great site if you're got Irish ancestors. So what happens? What do we get if we click on that? Right. Image. Oh, how cool is that? Gee, I hadn't actually looked at this before in any detail. Oh my goodness. There you go. That's for free. That's a marriage certificate that you get for nothing, where you have to pay for it in Victoria. So that's my, I don't know, great-great-grandparents. 22-year-old George Glover, 18-year-old Alan Dugan. She was a spinster. He was a weaver. And that's where they lived. James Glover and William Dugan. And he was a weaver, and her mother, his father was a something or other. So they were married. They weren't Catholic. Oh, United Church of England and Ireland. Yeah. So there you go. So that is Irish genealogy. So you might be lucky and find, like I did, a certificate like that of your great-great-grandparents. That is the coolest thing. So, and that's all. That's, you know, that's one of the benefits of digitizing. That you know, it's you get all this information now online for free, and it is just the most amazing thing. When you imagine what family history was like, trying to trace your family history in the 40 years ago, when nothing was online and you had to go to the Public Records Office to look everything up, and the State Library to look everything up. You know, there's amazing wealth of information at our fingertips at the moment for searching family history. So that is Irish Genealogy, that website here. Also got, this is a funny one. I didn't actually have that. The Old Bailey. So you can look up if you had a convict in the family, they may have been sentenced at the Old Bailey between 1674 and 1913. And you can search by what I like, search by verdict. Did they plead guilty? Guilty to theft under 10 shillings, not guilty. You can search by that, and you can search by sentence, which includes death and dissection, death drawn and quartered, death executed, death hanging in chains. I mean, it's not funny, but it's sort of interesting. So, yeah, so you can search this. So it just tells you how private whipping, public whipping, how much things have changed in the punishment field, and probably for good reason. So there's a whole wealth of information that you can get that also lists witnesses. So you may find that your ancestor was a witness to a crime or witness at a court case, and that would be listed here as well. So it doesn't, so what this does, things like this Old Bailey website, is to broaden out the picture of your family and of your ancestor and what they did and how they lived their life, and you know, and all those sorts of things. So, you know, you may find, because of course they were sentenced to transportation, which is another sentence here, for very, very, very small crime, minor crimes, what we call a minor crime these days. And, you know, it's just interesting to know what they did. What was that in? Oh, branding on cheek. Oh, my goodness. Anyway, so it's just a whole range of information that you can find out about people. So this is the proceedings of the Old Bailey, sort of worth looking at just to see. As I said, it also gives you the transcripts of all the court cases as well. So it's a great, interesting little site. All right, now I'll close some of these down. Military records, the first place to go for in Australia for military records is two sites. There's the National Archives of Australia, which you've probably all seen, and they've got all the World War I records digitised of the soldiers and the nurses, etc. They're all digitised. They've been like that for maybe 20 years, and they're currently working through all the World War II records. So every man and woman who enlisted for the Second World War, their personal records have been digitized, in the process of being digitized. They're a great resource, and just an interesting thing. Like, I look at them a lot, and you just see, you know, it's just interesting to see. I mean, you get the information, like you get who they were and their height and their weight and the colour of their eyes, and you get a signature. But you know, just when you start reading what they had to put up with and the conditions and the, you know, how they were wounded, and you know, it's just heartbreaking to read some of their files. But that's on the National Archives. The Australian War Memorial has another series of records, so they have all the nominal rolls, and the nominal rolls are lists of all the men and women who served overseas and what was their fate. So it has a nominal roll, it has Joe Bloggs, the date they enlisted, and whether they were killed in action, returned to Australia, died of wounds, whatever their fate was. So that's a list of everyone who went overseas, and then it was made up by the Army Office, whatever they called it, for when they returned. There's the embarkation rolls, and the embarkation rolls are for those who went, who served overseas. So and there's a list of when they went overseas to serve. So that's the start of the process. The nominal rolls are the end of the process. They also have the Roll of Honour, which are for people who were killed in action or died of wounds or were killed in service. And they also have the Red Cross, this is Red Cross files for people who were missing or prisoners of war. So there's a whole range of resources at the Australian War Memorial and the National Archives for your military men. But if you just want a summary, so there's this project here, the AIF Project, and they have a, the other thing to remember when you're looking for soldiers is that I think something like 300,000 served overseas, but something like 400,000 enlisted, and not everyone who enlisted was accepted. So maybe for military reasons or for things like that. So you may have thought, I know Grandpa enlisted, I can't find his record on the nominal roll or the embarkation roll, and that is because they never went overseas. But they will still have a file at the National Archives anyway, but they won't be on the nominal roll or the embarkation roll. So I'm just putting Weatherhead. So this is an interesting website that you can search by name or you can search by town. So actually we'll search by town and put in Mary Warren. So this tells you everyone who enlisted with Narry Warren as an address for either themselves or for their next of kin. And then once you've got it, we'll look at Charles. It just gives you a bit of a snapshot of their service, their regimental number, religion, occupation. You can see it all here, and what their fate. Well, it says they don't know what happened, and they've been adding more information all the time. So obviously, once again, you have all these volunteers who are working behind the scenes to do this, and it says that their brother also enlisted. So, you find this last column here, family military connections, is being expanded all the time. So this is a bit of a snapshot. I have seen mistakes in here, so I still think it's worth going to the National Archives to look at their file. But it's a great way to find out who in your area enlisted and just things like that. So this is the AIF project. soldier settlements. I love this site. This is a Public Records Office of Victoria site as well. Years ago, maybe 10 years ago, they digitised all the soldier settlement records. So after the war, and in an effort to find meaningful employment for the soldiers, they allowed them to lease farms, hopefully to make a living, and then eventually they would lease them, and then eventually they would purchase them. So so they're just all different stories. Weatherhead. I just put in Weatherhead because it's an easy name to spell. Oh, it's not an easy name to spell, but you're going to find someone eventually. So this is what tells you who he was, how where the farm was, what they rented. It often tells you their experience, their war experience, their previous farming experience. You can get quite a lot of information out of them, whether they're married, whether they have children. In terms of the lease, they weren't always successful, of course. But it is a nice bit of information about any of your ancestors to find out these soldier settlement files. And once again, a great example of digitisation, because what these organisations such as the State Library of Victoria, the Public Records Office, are trying to do is digitise all their popular or most frequently asked for resources, so that they can be protected and the originals can be protected, so you don't have to go to them all the time. So they spent a lot of money, a lot of time digitising these records, and they're now available online for everyone to look at. And another little site here, just an interesting site. This is a Narrawarrina District Family History Groups, Casey Cardinia Remembers, and this is a wonderful little site. So if you have a, and they've gone round, the volunteers of the Family History Group, and photographed every single monument, every plaque, every little whatever in Casey and Cardinia, and they're slowly putting it up online. And so street names, they've been through the Pakenham Uniting Church and taken a photo of every little plaque at the end of each pew. It's just this amazing resource of information. So if you've got local, anyone with local connections to the City of Casey Shire, Cardinia, it's just the most amazing thing. So you can just put in what do we get for Weatherhead? Oh, there we go. So obviously he's mentioned at the Bunya Pool somewhere. Anyway, so this is an example of all the plaques at the Bunya Pool, and there were photos of them and transcriptions of them as well. So well worth a look if you have any ancestors locally, to see whether they're, they had a plaque donated to them, or a pew donated to them at a church, or they got a plaque at a hall or something like that. So that's Casey Cardinia Remembers. And I'm going through. So we'll go back to the Public Records Office of Victoria and have a quick look at shipping records, which we find through, actually we'll just put a name in. So as I said before, the Public Records Office have been busy digitising all their records, including their shipping records, which originally they had their indexes online, but you had to actually go in there and look at their microfilm or microfiche or something to actually see the records. But they have since the last year or two digitised their records. I'm putting Catani because I'm a fan of Carlo Catani, and we'll find his shipping record here. So this is the sort of example you'll get of a shipping record, and you'll find one of your ancestors in there if you just put a name in when you're searching, or go to advanced search and you can put it as a phrase. So this is what you get. So this is it says TA. He's actually Carlo Catani. Okay, I remember his middle name, I should know that. And it says he was 24, which is probably right. He came in with Keki and Baraki, two other blokes as well. They come to New Zealand first, and then they came to Melbourne. So it does actually show that they're miners, which is not correct. They're all engineers, and they were Irish, which is also not correct. They're all Italian. So it's not perfect, and it depends what the shipping records were written by the captain, and he was the one who actually made the list of who was on the boat, what their occupation was, etc. So either they lied, or else they were written down incorrectly because the shipping company didn't really care. They just had to keep a list of people. But either way, it's an interesting sort of resource. But that is Carlo and his friends Chikiki and Bareki, who came in 1856 from New Zealand to Melbourne. So that's just one example of a shipping record. If you go to advanced search, I should have shown you this before, you can search for exact phrase. So I think if you're looking for, like, say, John Smith, that sort of name, I'd go to the advanced search and tick the exact phrase, and then you get, then you're looking for John Smith rather than looking for every John and every Smith. So the advanced search is always worth remembering. If you know the series, you can put the series in. So, you know, if you, so if you happen to know the series, so the series for township plans, at least 16171 or something, and they mention just search within a series, but their indexing and their searching at the Public Records Office has got better over the years. So shipping records are available here at the Public Records Office of Victoria. If you want to go to, we'll just go back to here to explore the collection by topic, and then go to passenger and records and immigration records. So this is where, if you do want to just put a name in, you can go to here. It tells you all about how to find the information. And there's all these lists here: assisted passengers, coastal passengers, outward passenger lists, etc. So all these lists here. Some are digitised, some aren't, but they're the good shipping records. Other shipping records I've got listed here. Scottish Immigration Database and the ships list, but also Ancestry and Find My Past have a lot of shipping records as well, which we'll find out next week. Cemeteries. So cemeteries, as I spoke about last week, are a great source of information. This is AustralianCemeteries.com. They have, if you go to Victoria, I showed you this last week, but we'll just look at Bunyip again. Let me look at. Depends. Every state is, every cemetery is different. Some have photos, some don't. Some have a list, some don't. You just, you know, you could be lucky and get a headstone photo. You may not find anything. But either way, this AustralianCemeteries.com.au website is well worth looking at. There's also other cemetery sites such as Billion Graves and Find a Grave, which are global sort of websites where people can add up, where cemetery records are added to them, and they can also, you can also find, you might find a photograph of someone's grave on that. But I like AustralianCemeteries.com. I think that's a good site. The other thing worth looking at is, if you're trying to find someone and you can't find them at a cemetery, is to have a look at the Springvale Botanical Cemetery, the necropolis as we used to call it. And they opened in, should have known when they opened, 1890 or something, but their first cremation was in 1906. So for people who were cremated, so their first crematorium opened in 1906. The second one in Victoria didn't open until 1927, and that was a Faulkner. So anyone who wanted to be cremated in the early days had to have it in Victoria, had to go to Springvale. So you'll find, even if their ashes were, as I saw somewhere the other day, someone was cremated there. The first man who was cremated there was in, I think it was December 1905, and they didn't even have a proper crematorium. The bitch had a hole in the ground and they just burned him up. And then he wanted his ashes scattered to the four corners of the world or something like that. So even for someone like him whose ashes aren't actually entombed or in storage at Springvale, if the ashes were collected, you'll still find a record of them on the Springvale website, which is Southern Metropolitan's Cemetery Trust. So if you're looking for someone and you're not sure, you know, it's always worth looking at the Springvale Botanical Gardens website just to see if there's someone that if you're missing someone, that you have a look there, because heaps of people who are cremated are listed on that. And there's also on your list a list of the addresses of the Greater Metropolitan Cemeteries Trust, which includes the Faulkner Cemetery, and Geelong, which includes about 20 other little cemeteries in the Geelong area, including Colac and all those areas. So So the benefit of cemetery records is that you'll often get a record of someone who died within the last 20 or 30 years that you don't find through the indexes to birth, deaths and marriages, because they only go to the year 1995 or something like that. So there's nearly 30 years of information you can't access, but you can maybe access them through the cemetery records. 11:45. So the next section is sites with links to genealogical resources. And I have a whole list of sites with links to other sites. And the ones we'll look at this one here, New Zealand history, as I said before. You know, if you're missing someone in Victoria or New South Wales, go and have a look in New Zealand, because as I said, they went from all over the world. So this just gives you a whole list of useful genealogical sites for New Zealand. Actually, while we're on this topic, oh no, nearly there. While we're here, so that's New Zealand, but this next site, Cindy's List, over 300,000 links. So this is where you'd go. So if you're looking for people who are what I call not English, so if you're looking for people from America or England or New Zealand or any other parts of the West of the English-speaking world, or the old Commonwealth, not what America was, it's easy to find that sort of information. If you want to find information about people who are not from the Anglo world, well then Cindy's List is a good place to look. Ancestry has lots of records from different countries, but Family Search, the Mormons website, which we'll look at next week, has heaps of information from other countries, especially like, you know, Africa, South America, and those other, and Asia as well, where it's harder to trace your ancestry there. It's much harder than it is to trace than in, say, Australia or Canada or America. So Cindy's List has a million categories. So if we go to I for Iceland, she has all links to Icelandic genealogy. So general resources, libraries, we can see all the categories here, and she has all these categories for every country in the world. So have a look at Cindy's List, or else particular religions, Jewish, Hindu, whatever. She has different categories for that. Go to religion. Oh, it's here. Look at this. Cowboys, ranchers in the Wild West. If you had anyone who's a cowboy in Montana, I'm sure you find it there. Death records, Danish records, disasters. Like you can just see here, the whole range of resources that she covers. So sometimes you find a bit of a dead link, but mostly you get really great resources here. Here's the Shakers, which is a Protestant religious group, and other related religions such as the Mennonites and the Quakers, etc. So, you know, it's really worth going through to Cindy's List if you're trying to find information on a non-Anglo country or specific religions, etc. So Cindy, after she's free, you can use it anywhere from home. You don't have to come to the library to use it, and she updates quite regularly. The other lists here, Claudia Genuki, which is many useful links for UK and Ireland genealogy. Curious Fox, which is a village by village site. So if you had if someone came from, you know, Boggs Creek in England, there's probably a little bit on the Curious Fox website about them. So, but they're all on the list here and you can go through them at home. So in my last category, which I call other, you can look at Trove, which I'm not going on about. I usually go on about it. I'm not going on about it today because Trove is we've been looking at that in 2 weeks' time. And Trove is, of course, the digitised newspapers, but it also includes other information such as government gazettes, photographs, manuscripts, books and images. It's a whole range of resources for tracing your family history, but we'll look at that in 2 weeks' time. papers passed, we'll look at the same time. So we'll look at the Victorian Government Gazette, which is the, this one here is what we want. Published between 1836 and 1997. It's still published today, but it's now online. And what you'll find in this is the Government Gazette includes all official notifications of government and legal activities. So if your ancestor was a trustee of a church in 1850, you'll find them listed here. If they had a patent, you'll find them listed here. My great-grandfather had a patent. Here we are. And I mean, you don't know what you're going to find. So here's Alfred Deakin, the Prime Minister, who is Minister of Water Supply. So he got a patent for, there he is here, of Lineville, improved mechanism for operating the throttle or cut-off valves of engines from their governors. So he got a patent for that. If he had a, here he is, trustee for Cemetery, here's someone else. So this is an appointment as a food inspector, an appointment as an attendant at the Department of Chief Secretary, other attendants here. A whole range of things. If they're registrars for the birth, deaths and marriages, they will be listed here. Cemetery trustee, church trustees, public hall trustees, anything. So you will, it's always worth looking. You don't know what you're going to find. And once again, it doesn't help you find out when they were born or when they died, but gives you some idea of what they did in their life and how they lived their life and what sort of community appointments they had. And that sort of just fills in the picture of your ancestors. And that's what I like about it. So as I said, you'll be surprised what you might find here, or else you could just put in, if you're interested, just a town to see how your town developed or the town where your ancestors lived. And so this is when the Coralline Township was proclaimed in June 1910. So, and also the Recreation Reserve. So you just get, I mean, sometimes you get nothing, but sometimes you get a bit of information. So that's the Victorian Government Gazette, well worth looking at. Ryzen Index. I'll look that up. Ryzen Index, if you haven't seen that, this is fantastic. It's on your list. So this is a Ryzen Index, an index of birth, deaths, and death notices in the Australian newspapers, all done by volunteers. Information is added all the time. It was started off as a New South Wales thing, but they're adding more and more information, and people are going back through the Herald Sun and those sort of things and adding more information all the time. So so if you had of course, a lot of people don't put death notices in the papers anymore, but if you're lucky enough that they did, you can see. So what it tells you is here's Ada Weatherhead. She died in 1941 at the Austin Hospital, and it was in the Age. So you could go to Trove and actually find that on Trove, the death notice. Recent ones like this, Lal Weatherhead, who died 2018, tells you. And there's often information about who her husband was, who their husband was, or when they were born, and this is her maiden name. So it just gives you, for people who died recently, it gives you often the date of death and where you might find a death notice. So to get more information, Herald Sun, you might have to go to State Library to find this, but you know, sometimes they're on Trove, sometimes they're on other newspaper databases, which we'll look at when I do Trove in 2 weeks' time. So that's the Ryzen Index, all done by volunteers, as I said, and really a wonderfully useful index. It's just an amazing thing. Quickly, Vanish is a Victorian Adoption Network for information and self-help. So if you were adopted or you had people in the family who were adopted, this is where you might go for information that are clear. I'm not going to tell you much over the telephone, but you know, if you're trying to, if your father was adopted or someone like that, and he's trying to find his parents, this site here, Vanish, gives you information and support. Find and Connect is another sort of similar one for, these are for children who are brought up in homes. So this is information about orphanages, children's homes and other institutions. So sometimes you even get photographs as well, because putting Kildonan, and we spell it correctly. I'll just do one at random here. Oh, heavens above. I'll put in Brighton. Okay, so here's the Brighton Industrial School. So it tells you, this is the same information you get on everything. The data that they were, they run, information about them, and where you might find records for them or not. It just depends, of course. Not everyone, there aren't records for everything. And of course, some of the records are the Public Records Office of Victoria, but of course you can't access them all because of privacy reasons. But, you know, it's a good thing. You might even find photos as well. For some children, of course, if they weren't brought up in their home, they wouldn't have had family photos. So they might be really pleased to see a photograph of their time at a children's home, because that's the only photo they have of their childhood. But for others, of course, they don't want that to be public because they're ashamed or they're embarrassed or various reasons. So Find and Connect is the where you go for information about orphanages and children's homes and things like that. But as I said, you're not going to find information about your, you know, you can't put in John Smith and find it all about him, but at least gives you information, and then you can go further on from there, because it tells you where to get more information. And the last one we'll look at is the, I haven't got it up, Royal Historical Society of Victoria. Historical societies are a good place to find information. So this is the Royal Historical Society of Victoria. If you go to search societies and you put in a name of a place, Traralgon, did I spell that right? Yep. And you will get, nothing. Well, let's try another search. We'll go for Trafalgar. Golly, am I getting nothing here? Oh, search societies. Okay, sorry. There you go. The importance of ticking the right box. Illustrated once again. Okay, Trafalgar Historical Society finally got there. So there's hundreds of historical societies in Victoria, all have different sources of information, hundreds of historical societies all around Australia. And they, you know, so if you want to go, if you had ancestors who grew up in the Trafalgar, check out the Trafalgar Historical Society. It gives you contact details, and then you might find they have records of school records, cemetery records, old newspapers, old photographs, family trees, lots and lots of things, information about businesses, lots and lots of information. So I can't stress enough how important it is to look at local historical societies in the areas where your ancestors came from. Very quick look at lots and lots and lots and lots of different sites, and they're all free, apart from Ancestry and Find My Past. You can use them all from home, from your own computer. You don't need to be in the library or anything like that. You can just use them from home any time of the night or day.